There is a machine on this station that dispenses nutrition packets in exchange for small metal discs. I know what you're thinking. So do we. Every civilization past the third tier of spacefaring has some version of transactional nutrient distribution. You insert a token. You receive sustenance. It is, by any reasonable measure, one of the least interesting technologies ever to exist. I watched a human interact with one for 11 minutes. 11 minutes. By the end, I had filed 3 incident reports, revised my standing assessment of human threat classification from moderate to please update the database immediately, and developed what the station medic later called a stress ulcer consistent with prolonged existential dread. The human got their nutrition packet. They also, and I cannot stress this enough, accidentally destabilized a 300-year-old diplomatic non-aggression framework that 7 species had spent generations constructing. With a vending machine. Because the spiral coil got stuck. My name is Secondary Logistics Officer Vrethkahan, and I have been stationed aboard Convergence Hub Oran 7 for 4 cycles. My job is to manage the flow of cargo, personnel, and minor cultural incidents between species that would otherwise find reasons to shoot at each other. I am good at my job. I was good at my job. I keep a running log, not regulation, just a habit I developed after my first posting when I realized nobody would believe me otherwise. I dictate into it when things go wrong. Sometimes I dictate into it while things are going wrong, which several colleagues have described as concerning and which I describe as the only way I stay sane. What follows is a partial transcript of that log, supplemented by station surveillance records, 3 separate diplomatic communiques, and 1 nutritional packet wrapper that will, I am told, be entered into the Galactic Historical Archive as a primary source document. I need you to understand the scale of what I'm about to tell you. 1 human. 1 broken vending machine. 11 minutes. 300 years of carefully negotiated peace hanging by a coil spring. And me standing there with my log recorder running, watching it happen, completely unable to stop any of it. This is that story. Log entry Vrethkahan, Secondary Logistics, Oran 7. Standard Cycle 7, Subrotation 14. I am dictating this while hiding behind a structural support column on Promenade Level 3. For the record. The human arrived on the 0600 shuttle from Kellen Station with a transit pass, a duffel bag the approximate size and weight of a collapsed star, and a disposition I can only describe as cheerfully exhausted, which is a combination I had previously believed was physiologically impossible. I know this because I processed her manifest. Her name, rendered into a script my translator hardware can manage, is something like Specialist Yara Okafor-Bell. United Earth Cooperative Forces. Attached to a joint resupply rotation. Temporary assignment, Oran 7, duration 8 standard days. No significant threat flags. No disciplinary notations beyond 1 incident labeled Vending Unit Altercation, Kellen Station, resolved without escalation. I read that notation. I flagged it. Then, I looked at the column under Resolved without escalation and thought, yes, that column exists, that seems important, that is probably nothing. I went back to processing cargo invoices. This was my first mistake. She came through arrivals at 0618, moving with that specific human gait that looks like a malfunction until you realize it isn't all rolling weight and absorbed impact, like they're perpetually braced for the floor to drop. I've seen it on hundreds of humans. It still reads wrong to my eyes. Something about the knee joint. Something about the way the spine stays still while everything below it does all the work. I noticed her because she was the only passenger from that shuttle who wasn't looking at the ceiling. Every other species that passes through arrivals looks up. It's the light arrays. We have Vethia Commission luminescence panels that scatter at 12 different wavelengths simultaneously. Vethic aesthetics trend toward what I can only call aggressively beautiful. Most travelers stop. Most travelers crane their necks and make sounds their species uses for wonder. Yara Okafor-Bell looked at the floor. More specifically, she looked at the directory signage on the floor, the wayfinding strips we installed 3 cycles ago after the Garaden incident, which I will not get into, except to say it involved 6 missing delegations and 1 very embarrassed cartographer. She followed the green strip to the transit wing. She followed the orange strip toward temporary crew quarters. She stopped at the blue strip. The blue strip leads to Promenade Level 3. Promenade Level 3 is where we keep the vending units. Log Addendum 0623. She found it in 4 minutes. The promenade is not clearly signed from the crew quarters corridor. 3 different species have complained about the wayfinding system. One diplomatic aide spent 40 minutes lost in the maintenance wing last cycle and lodged a formal grievance. She found it in 4 minutes. I'm noting this because it feels like it should mean something. The vending unit in question is a model I will call Unit 7C, which is the actual designation stenciled on its side panel. It is a human-manufactured machine, which is why it's on Oran 7 et al. We carry several, because human personnel rotate through this station on a near-constant basis, and human dietary requirements are specific enough that feeding them from the general commissary produces what the medical staff describe as enthusiasm-dampening gastrointestinal events. Unit 7C vends nutrition packets. It accepts 2 forms of payment: the standard United Earth credit chip or a physical coin, the kind stamped from metal, the kind humans apparently still use because several of their older compact agreements require payment systems that don't rely on network uptime. The machine takes both. It's been operating on this station for 3 cycles without incident. I say without incident. What I mean is, without recorded incident. I have begun to suspect those are different things. Yara stood in front of Unit 7C at 0624 and studied it for approximately 30 seconds with the particular quality of attention humans use when they are not yet frustrated but have already decided they might become frustrated. She inserted a coin. She pressed a selection B7, the nutrient packet that comes labeled with what I understand to be a print of some kind of portable bread food, the packaging designed to suggest warmth and comfort, the contents bearing approximately no resemblance to either. The coil turned. 40%. Stopped. I want you to understand the geometry of what happens when a vending coil sticks at 40%. The item moves. It rotates toward the edge of the shelf. It presents itself teetering, visible, technically accessible, but it doesn't fall. The coil has advanced just far enough that the packet is no longer in its original position, but not far enough that gravity wins. It just sits there. Tilted. Taunting. I have personally witnessed 4 species respond to this exact situation. The Vethiac politely request a maintenance filing and wait. The Garadan insert another coin and repeat the selection until something falls or they run out of coins, at which point they file an insurance claim. The Rethsul simply leave. They walk away. I've never fully understood if this is cultural acceptance of disappointment or if they just don't care enough about nutrition to argue with a machine. Yara Okafor Bell looked at the tilted packet for 3 full seconds. Then, she knocked on the glass. Not hard. A knuckle rap, 3 times, the kind of casual negotiation a person makes with a machine they're treating as a reasonable entity who might simply need reminding of its obligations. The knock said, "Hey. Hey. You know what you're supposed to be doing here." The packet didn't fall. She knocked again. Harder. 2-handed, palms flat, a solid thump against the front panel that made Unit 7C rock slightly on its base and caused the 2 Vethiac cultural liaisons walking behind her to pause and look at each other with an expression I have learned to read as should we be concerned. The packet didn't fall. She stepped back. She looked at the machine. She tilted her head. She looked at the coin return slot. She pressed the return button. Nothing happened. She pressed it 3 more times in the rhythm humans apparently believe unlocks whatever obstinacy a machine has developed. Nothing. She looked at the selection buttons. She pressed B7 again. The coil turned. Another 30%. The packet rotated, actually spun a full quarter turn on its new position, and then settled sideways, now wedged. Now more stuck. Log Addendum 0628. She's been at the machine for 4 minutes. I should not be watching this. I have cargo invoices. I have a Rethsul delegation arriving at 1,100 who will require 47 individual berth assignments and a formal air quality confirmation for their quarters. I have actual responsibilities. The packet is wedged sideways now. She's examining the coin slot again. I'm watching this. What happened next, I have reviewed in the surveillance footage 17 times. I am including the timestamp sequence in this log because I want the record to be precise. I want anyone who reads this in some future context, some archive, some inquiry, some training document titled What Not to Do When a Human Finds a Vending Machine to understand the exact progression. 0629:14 Yara steps to the side of Unit 7C and examines the ventilation panel on the machine's left face. 0629:31 She runs her fingers along the panel seam. Not aggressively. Clinically. The way an engineer tests a joint. 0629:44 She reaches into the left side pocket of her duffel bag and produces a flat tool approximately 12 centimeters long that I will later learn is called a multi-tool and, which, it turns out, humans carry the way other species carry communication devices, habitually, constantly, as an extension of their operating capacity rather than a response to any specific anticipated need. She has a tool. She brought a tool. She didn't buy the tool for this. She simply had it. 0630:02 She uses the tool to open the ventilation panel. I should have intervened at 0630:02. I want the record to show that I know this. I have acknowledged this to myself privately, to Station Commander Oren Vass directly, and to 3 separate inquiry panels who all, to their credit, resisted the obvious joke. I did not intervene at 0630:02 because I was 90 meters away, behind the arrivals desk, and what I saw on my surveillance feed looked, at that distance, like standard maintenance behavior. We have maintenance personnel. They open panels. She was wearing a crew uniform. I thought, for approximately 11 seconds, that she was maintenance personnel I hadn't processed yet. Then, I looked at her transit manifest again. Specialist, United Earth Cooperative Forces. Dietary rotation assignment. Not maintenance. Not engineering. Dietary rotation. I stood up so fast I knocked my log recorder off the desk. The ventilation panel on Unit 7C does not provide internal access to the coil mechanism. I know this. The machine's technical documentation, which I have now read in its entirety twice, makes this very clear. The ventilation panel covers a heat exchange array and the secondary power coupling. Nothing that touches the vending mechanism. Nothing that could, under any reasonable interpretation of physics, reach the stuck packet. Yara didn't care about any of that. What she cared about, what she'd noticed, apparently, in the 4 seconds she spent examining the side panel before opening it, was that the heat exchange array ran directly adjacent to the rear wall of the vending channel. And the rear wall of the vending channel had, at some point in the machine's operational history, developed a slight flex. A slight flex. Approximately 3 millimeters of give when pressure is applied. She put the flat of her palm against the heat exchange housing, not touching anything electrical, not breaking any connections, just pressing against the outer casing at a specific angle, and pushed. The machine flexed. The vending channel flexed with it. The packet, which had been wedged sideways, rotated. And fell. Clunk. That was the sound. One small, perfectly ordinary clunk of a nutrition packet hitting the retrieval tray. I was 30 meters away by then, walking fast, not quite running, because running looks alarming and I was still hoping this was recoverable. I heard the clunk. I watched Yara reach into the retrieval tray and take out her packet. She looked at it. She turned it over. She read the back. Then, she looked at the open ventilation panel. She looked at her multi-tool. She closed the panel. She clicked the panel back into place. She put the tool back in her bag. She opened the packet, took a bite of the bread-adjacent product inside, made a face that I now recognize as this tastes like it's trying, and walked away. Clean. Efficient. Gone. 11 seconds from push to departure. I stood in front of Unit 7C and stared at the retrieval tray. Then, I looked at the ventilation panel. Then, I looked at the surveillance camera. Then, I looked back at the empty promenade. Log Addendum 0634. She got the packet. I am trying to figure out exactly what just happened and whether any of it matters. The maintenance flag I'm filling out right now will say minor panel access, no damage, no regulatory breach. That's accurate. That is technically accurate. I keep thinking about how she looked at the side of the machine. How fast she found the give in the wall. How she didn't try harder with the obvious approach, she stopped trying the obvious approach and found a different one. In 4 minutes. 4 minutes. I'm going back to my desk. I have cargo invoices. I'm putting a note on this file, monitor. The Vethic cultural liaisons who'd been walking past the machine when she knocked on the glass, their names are Liaison Coordinator Thesovan and Cultural Advisor Pralmahan, filed a verbal inquiry with my desk at 0640. Not a complaint. An inquiry. We observed the human at the nutrition unit, Thesovan said. She had that careful quality in her voice, the one Vethic use when they're not sure if they're about to be impolite. She interfaced with the maintenance panel. She retrieved a stuck item, I said. Yes. Thesovan paused. She opened the panel herself. She did. Another pause. Longer. The unit was not resistant? I looked at the Vethic liaison. Thesovan is a senior diplomat. She's been stationed on Oran 7 for longer than I have. She coordinates cultural exchange programming between 4 species, manages the aesthetics budget for the luminescence panels, and has never, in my experience, asked a question she didn't already know the shape of the answer to. The unit was resistant, I said. She worked around it. Thesovan looked at her colleague. Pralmahan looked back. Said Thesovan. They left. I watched them go. Then, I pulled up Unit 7C's service history and started reading. There was nothing wrong with what Yara did. I want to be clear about that. She caused no damage. She violated no posted regulation. The ventilation panel on Unit 7C has a standard public access maintenance note on the side of the machine. I found it when I looked, small type, partially obscured by a nutrient packet advertisement. But, there, and she'd clearly known to look for it or known from prior experience that vending machines of this model have them. She got her food. She left. Nothing broke. And, yet. Log Addendum 0647. The Vethic liaison just left my desk. I've been sitting here for 6 minutes without filing a single invoice. I keep thinking about what Thesovan said. The unit was not resistant. Like that was the surprising part. Not that the human opened the panel. That the human kept going until the machine wasn't resistant anymore. I'm going to run her transit file again. I want to see that notation from Kellen Station. The one that said, vending unit altercation, resolved without escalation. I want to know what resolved looked like. I pulled the Kellen file at 0649. The Kellen incident lasted 18 minutes. The packet, also stuck. The resolution, Yara had, and, I am reading directly from the maintenance log here, assisted station personnel in identifying a calibration fault in 3 adjacent units of the same model, resulting in a maintenance update that was subsequently applied station-wide. 3 units. She'd noticed the fault in 3 units by the time station maintenance arrived. They fixed all of them. Because she was stuck in front of one. I sat with that for a moment. Then, I filed my cargo invoices. But, I kept the file open. The Rethsul delegation arrived at 1100. I processed their 47 berth assignments. I confirmed the air quality certification. I handled a minor dispute about the luminescence panel settings in their corridor, which they found, and, this is a direct quote from the formal request, aggressively beautiful in a manner inconsistent with restful function. I dimmed the panels. I had lunch. At 1340, I received a message from Thesovan. It said, I would like to speak with you about the human. At your convenience. Not urgent. Not urgent in Vethic diplomatic language means, this is urgent, but I am giving you the social grace of treating it as optional so you feel comfortable saying yes immediately. I replied, I'm available now. She arrived at my desk 4 minutes later. There is a formal reception this evening, Thesovan said. She sat across from me with the careful posture Vethic maintain in professional settings, every line deliberate, every pause its own kind of sentence. For the Rethsul delegation. Standard cultural welcome. It is the opening ceremony of the Third Oran Compact Review. I knew about the Compact Review. Everyone on the station knew about the Compact Review. The Third Oran Compact is the non-aggression and trade framework that has governed relations between 6 species in this sector for the last 300 years. The review happens every generation. It is, by any measure, the single most diplomatically significant event this station hosts. The human, Thesovan said, will be attending. I looked at her. Standard crew courtesy invitation. It was extended to all non-temporary station personnel before her assignment was confirmed. She is technically classified as non-temporary for the duration of her 8-day rotation. I kept looking at her. She accepted, Thesovan said. A pause. She responded to the invitation within 4 minutes of receiving it, Prail Mahan added, from slightly behind and to the left where I hadn't noticed him standing. Which is, by Vethic social convention, either extremely enthusiastic or extremely strategic. We are uncertain which. I thought about the vending machine. I thought about the Kellen file. 4 minutes. I'll be at the reception, I said. Yes, said Thesovan. We assumed you would. Log Addendum, 1352. Her name is Yara Okaforbel. She arrived this morning. She got a snack. She is going to a diplomatic reception that is part of a 300-year-old ongoing compact negotiation. I don't know why I'm worried. She's a dietary rotation specialist. She accepted a courtesy invitation. This is a normal sequence of events. I'm worried. The reception starts at 1900. I'm going to go to the gym and not think about any of this. Log paused. Log entry Vrethkahan. 1847, pre-reception. I am standing outside the Promenade Event Hall in my formal administrative jacket, which I have not worn since the last Compact Review 7 years ago and which has apparently decided, in the interim, to become 2 sizes smaller. I dictate this because I want the record to show I arrived early. I also want the record to show that I have not been thinking about the vending machine situation and have been entirely focused on my professional responsibilities. This is not true. I have been thinking about the vending machine situation constantly. Log paused. The event hall on Oran 7 is the one place on the station where the Vethic aesthetic sensibility gets to operate without restraint, budget consideration, or the gentle pushback of species who find 12 simultaneous wavelengths of light a lot. The ceiling is a constructed sky, not a projection, actual luminescent material shaped into something that isn't quite clouds and isn't quite aurora but exists in the comfortable space between. The floor is Vethic polished stone that reflects everything above it, so walking through the room feels like walking through 2 versions of the same sky simultaneously. It is, objectively, one of the most beautiful spaces I've ever stood in. I have also watched it cause 3 separate diplomatic incidents based purely on lighting-related aesthetic disagreements, so I approach it the way I approach most beautiful things on this station, with appreciation and a readiness to file a report. I arrived at 1853. Thesovan was already there, near the entrance, positioned in the precise location that allows her to monitor arrivals without appearing to monitor arrivals. This is a skill that takes decades to develop. She acknowledged me with a movement of 2 fingers that means you're late in Vethic formal language, despite the fact that the reception didn't start until 1900 and I was 7 minutes early. She's not here yet, Prail Mahan said, from just behind and to the left again. He has a talent for occupying space without announcing it that I find professionally impressive and, personally, unsettling. I started. You were, said Thesovan. I straightened my jacket. The Rethsul delegation entered at 1858 in the formal grouping their culture uses for diplomatic events, a configuration of 7, the senior member centered, 3 flanking members on each side, all moving with that synchronized fluidity that their species develops through years of coordination training. They are imposing beings, tall, with the layered integument that shifts between copper and deep blue depending on emotional state, a visual vocabulary of feeling that they are entirely aware humans and most other species cannot read accurately and, which they have, over centuries of diplomatic contact, learned to treat as a privacy asset rather than an accessibility problem. The senior member, Ambassador Tressalon, was copper neutral. Diplomatic mode. Everything locked down. The third Oran Compact review was 307 years old. The Refsul had signed it under duress, during a period when their territorial expansion had been checked by 3 simultaneous conflicts and they'd needed the Vethiac's neutrality guarantee to stabilize their resource corridors. 307 years. For complete generational turnovers of their leadership structure. And they still negotiated every review as though the original duress were fresh. I know this from the briefing documents I'd read 4 cycles ago when the review was scheduled. I know it the way I know most things that don't directly involve cargo manifests, abstractly, distantly, in the useful background knowledge part of my mind that I maintain so I don't accidentally do something diplomatically catastrophic. Tressalon's integument flickered briefly into blue, then, back to copper. Something in the room had registered. I looked at the entrance. Yara arrived at 1901. 1 minute late, which is either a statement or just traffic from crew quarters, and I had no way to know which and would not, I decided, spend any more attention trying to figure out. She was wearing the dress uniform of the United Earth Cooperative Forces, formal, dark, decorated with the service ribbons of someone who has been in enough places that the ribbons stopped feeling like decorations and started feeling like a catalog. She'd done something with her hair that involved what I can only describe as controlled architecture, nothing elaborate, nothing that read as performance, but clearly considered. She looked like someone who had been to receptions before. She scanned the room. Not the ceiling. Not the floor as sky reflection. She moved her eyes around the perimeter exits, groupings, power positions, and then, apparently satisfied, she went to get a drink from the service station near the east wall. Tressalon's integument went briefly blue again. She catalogued the room, Prailmahan said, very quietly, next to my ear. He'd drifted over without my noticing. She was looking for acquaintances, I said. A pause. Prailmahan has a talent for pauses that contain entire disagreements. Yes, he said. Possibly. Log Addendum, 1906. The reception is fine. This is a normal diplomatic reception. I have attended 12 of these. Nothing unusual is happening. Yara is talking to a Garadan trade attaché near the service station. They appear to be having a conversation about the drinks. She just made a gesture I don't recognize, circular, with the hand holding the glass, ending in something like a shrug. The Garadan laughed. I didn't know Garadan formal faces could do that. This is fine. Diplomacy through social lubrication is standard. This is normal. Log paused. The formal presentation portion of a compact review reception operates through a specific protocol that Thesovan had briefed me on twice and, which I had dutifully memorized. The host coordinator, delivers the welcome statement, the senior ambassador, Tressalon, delivers the response, the junior delegations present their stations in order of seniority. Then, 3 cycles of structured mingling, then, a shared meal, then, the official opening of review documentation. Clean. Established. 300 years of doing this same sequence. Thesovan's welcome statement was elegant, 7 minutes, 3 languages, the precise amount of Refsul historical reference required to signal respect without implying the Vethiac felt obligated. I have heard diplomats speak for 30 minutes and communicate less. Tressalon's response was 7 minutes and 4 seconds, which was 4 seconds longer than the welcome statement, which was deliberate and which everyone in the room who understood Refsul protocol registered as a small assertion of senior standing. Then, the junior delegations. Then, mingling. Yara was on her second drink by the time the structured mingling phase began. She'd finished talking to the Garadan attaché and was now standing near the edge of the room where a series of display panels showed the historical timeline of the Oran Compact, the original signing, the subsequent reviews, the conflicts that had nearly unraveled it in Cycle 180, the reconstruction that followed. Educational materials. Background context. She was reading them. Reading them. Not glancing. Not looking at them while actually watching something else, which is what most people do with wall displays at receptions. She had her drink, and she was standing with her weight shifted onto her right hip in the way humans stand when they intend to stay somewhere for a while, and she was reading. I should have moved closer then. I was watching Tressalon work the room. The ambassador moves through spaces with a precision that I've come to understand as assessment, every pause a measurement, every engagement a data point. The Rethsul are not casual social beings. They attend receptions the way I imagine they attend tactical briefings, present, watching, recording. Tressalon's path through the room had a shape to it. It was leading toward the display panels. They ended up standing next to each other at approximately 1927. I know this because I have the surveillance timestamp. I know the exact second. I have reviewed that timestamp the way you review the moment before a vehicle collision, not to prevent it, because it's already done, but because you keep hoping the replay will show something different. Tressalon and Yara, side by side in front of a display panel showing the original compact signing, 307 years prior. The ambassador looked at the human. The human, for a moment, didn't notice. She was reading the annotation beneath the signing image, something about the contested territorial language in the original text, a footnote that most people skip. Then, she registered the presence beside her and looked up. The language in Section 4C was a compromise, said Tressalon. In common trade, which is the mutual language everyone at this station uses. The ambassador's common trade is precise and accented with the resonance quality their species carries in formal speech. We have never stopped negotiating it. Yeah, said Yara. She looked at the annotation, then, back at the ambassador. The boundary description uses geographic markers that changed. Geological shift? A pause. Tectonic movement, said Tressalon. Yes. So every review, you're arguing about what the original signatories meant by a mountain that moved. Another pause. Longer. Among other things, said Tressalon. Yara looked at the panel. She took a drink. She said, that sounds exhausting. I crossed the room. I crossed the room as naturally as I could, because what you don't do in this situation, what you never do, is visibly panic sprint toward an ambassador mid-diplomatic conversation. You find reasons to be where you need to be. You have a purpose. You were going to look at this display panel anyway, coincidentally, right now. I arrived in time to hear Tressalon say, it is. Not in a dismissive way. Not in the way that ends conversations. In the way that agrees with something true. Yara had turned to look at the ambassador with that particular human expression I have learned to read as recalibrating, something in their face that changes when they get information they didn't expect. Not surprise, exactly. More like, okay, you're real, I'm adjusting. Vrethkahan, said Tressalon, without looking at me. Secondary logistics. Ambassador, I said. I hope the reception, the human raises an interesting point about the Section 4C language, said Tressalon. I looked at Yara. Yara looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as I didn't start this. The panel annotation is very thorough, I said. It omits the context, said Tressalon. The language was written in a single night. The Rethsul lead negotiator at the time had been awake for 40 hours. The geographic markers were the first stable reference points they found in available documentation. Not the best ones. The first ones. A beat. That, said Yara, explains so much. Tressalon's integument moved. A ripple, copper to the faintest edge of blue, then, back. I've attended 6 compact review receptions. I have never seen Tressalon's integument move at one. It does, the ambassador said. Log Addendum, 1931. I am standing at a display panel with the Rethsul senior ambassador and a dietary rotation specialist who got here this morning via a breakfast snack altercation. They are talking about the founding documents of a 300-year compact. This is fine. This is fine. This is, Tressalon just laughed. I didn't know Rethsul formal bodies could do that. Log paused. I need to describe what Rethsul laughter sounds like, for the record, because it is relevant to what happened next. It is not loud. It is not performed. It is a sound like pressure releasing a brief harmonic in the lower resonance range that their species uses for internal communication, surfacing for just a moment before being contained again. You feel it more than you hear it. A room temperature vibration that starts somewhere in the middle of your sternum and disappears before you can be sure it was real. The Garadan attaché, across the room, turned to look. Two Vethic junior liaisons paused their conversation. Pralmahan, from behind and to the left, appeared at my shoulder like a diplomatic spirit animal. What did she say? He said, very quietly. The negotiator had been awake 40 hours, I said. Pralmahan was quiet for a moment. The Section 4C language. Yes. Another moment. She read the annotation. Yes. And, she commented on it to the ambassador. Yes. And, the ambassador, yes. Pralmahan made a sound that I, after 4 cycles of working with Vethic, have learned to identify as something between fascinating and, oh no. Thesovan reached the display panel at 1934. Tressalon and Yara had, by then, progressed from the founding panel to the panel showing cycle 180, the near collapse, the reconstruction, and Yara was asking questions that were either diplomatically savvy or diplomatically oblivious, and I genuinely could not tell which I found deeply alarming, because usually I can tell. The reconstruction took longer than the original compact, Yara said. She was looking at the timeline. Why? Trust, said Tressalon. Yeah, but, Yara gestured at the panel, the movement of someone who's picked up a thread and is following it. You lost trust because of the Section 4C language dispute in cycle 170, right? The boundary interpretation. So why didn't the reconstruction just fix the language? We tried, said Tressalon. And? The fix required acknowledging that the original language was a mistake. Yara looked at the ambassador. Admitting that someone made a mistake is harder than rebuilding from the mistake. Not a question. Tressalon looked back at her. Yes, said the ambassador, very simply. Thesovan stopped beside me. She looked at Tressalon. She looked at Yara. She looked at me. Her expression said, when did this happen and how did this happen and whose fault is this all at the same time? She read the panel, I said. Thesovan looked at the panel. She read all of the panel, said Pralmahan. I want to be precise about what Yara did and did not do at that reception, because I've since had to describe it to 3 inquiry panels and 1 very exhausted station commander, and the framing matters. She did not make any political statements. She did not express any position on the compact language dispute. She did not advocate for any party's interpretation of Section 4C. She read the display panels, all of them, sequentially, with the focused attention she'd brought to the maintenance notation on Unit 7C, and she asked questions. Just questions. The kind of questions that come from reading something carefully and noticing that things don't add up. The kind of questions that a person asks when they're not invested in the answer but they're curious about the shape of it. The kind of questions that, in a different context, would have been answered by a station tour guide and forgotten. Tressalon answered every single one. 7 of them. I counted. I have the surveillance record. 7 questions in 22 minutes of conversation, which is, I later looked this up, more conversational exchanges than the Rethsul senior ambassador had engaged in at the previous 4 compact review opening receptions combined. Log Addendum, 1953. Dinner service is about to begin. Seating is assigned. Tressalon's assigned seat is at the senior diplomatic table, with Thesovan, the Garadan first representative, and the Rethsul cultural advisor. Yara's assigned seat is at table 7, with the junior administrative staff, the station medical liaison, and a Vethic logistics coordinator I hired 6 months ago who was very good at her job and extremely boring at dinner. Tressalon just asked Thesovan if the human might be seated at the senior table. Thesovan is standing completely still, which is what Vethiate do when they are having a very large feeling that they have decided not to show. I am going to go sit down and not make eye contact with anyone. The dinner seating change required 4 minutes of coordination, 2 quiet conversations conducted in Vethiate formal register, and 1 seating chart revision that the junior logistics staff had to physically reprint because the event hall uses physical placards for the senior table, a Rethsul tradition maintained across all 300 years of reviews, because the Rethsul do not fully trust digital displays for formal documentation. Physical placards. They had to print a new one. Yara sat at the senior diplomatic table next to Tressalon, with the expression of someone who was mildly surprised to be moved but had decided to be gracious about it. I sat at table 7. With the medical liaison and the boring logistics coordinator and my dinner, which I ate mechanically, watching the senior table from across the room, trying to read integument shifts and body language from 40 meters in dim Vethiate lighting, feeling the particular exhaustion of a person whose job has gone sideways in a way that is technically no one's fault. "You're doing the thing," said the medical liaison, whose name is Senvara and who has, over 4 cycles, developed an accurate vocabulary for my specific dysfunctions. "What thing?" "The thing where you watch something you can't control and make it worse by watching." "I'm not the vending machine thing." I looked at Senvara. "Thesovan told me," Senvara said, without apology. "She said a human fixed a stuck machine by finding where it flexed." I looked back at the senior table. "The ambassador is showing her something on a physical document," I said. "That's not standard." "The ambassador brought physical documents to a reception dinner." Senvara looked. Rethsul don't carry documents to social occasions. Documents are for official sessions." "Yes. That document is," I squinted. "That's the Section 4C language. Original text." She brought it to a reception. Senvara set down her fork. "Is that good?" I opened my log recorder. "I don't know," I said. Log addendum, 2117. Dinner is ending. The formal opening of the review documentation is in 9 minutes. Tressalon and Yara have been talking for the better part of an hour. I caught fragments through the ambient noise, mostly things I couldn't make out, but at one point I heard Yara say, "But if both parties acknowledge the underlying problem separately, you don't need anyone to admit fault publicly," and then Tressalon's integument did the blue thing again. I don't know what that sentence means in context. I am deeply afraid of what that sentence means in context. The review opens in 8 minutes. I need to be in the official logistics position. I need to stop watching this table. I am not going to stop watching this table. The formal opening of compact review documentation is a ceremony. I say ceremony in the way that any 300-year-old tradition becomes ceremony, not performance, but ritual. The documents are presented. The senior parties verify the documentation sequence. A standard statement of intent is read. Everyone confirms their understanding of the review timeline. Clean. Established. What is not part of the ceremony? Any discussion of substantive content. The substantive sessions begin the next morning. Day 2 through day 6 of the review. Opening night is protocol and formality only. This has always been true. This has always been unambiguously, structurally true for every single review since the original signing. At 21:26, Tressalon, upon receiving the documentation sequence confirmation, said to Thesovan, "We would like to table a preliminary statement regarding Section 4C. The event hall was not, technically, silent. There was ambient sound. There is always ambient sound. But there was a quality of attention that moved through the room the way a pressure change moves through water, not loud, not dramatic, just suddenly present." Thesovan looked at the ambassador. The ambassador's integument was the steadiest copper I had ever seen on any Rethsul face. Locked down completely. Whatever decision had been made, it had been made before walking into this room. "A preliminary statement," said Thesovan, carefully. "Not a position," said Tressalon. "An acknowledgement." That the language in question reflects specific historical circumstances of composition. That those circumstances are relevant context for the current review. A pause. It requires no response. No counterstatement. No concession from any party. The Geraden first representative had gone very still. The Vethic junior liaisons were looking at Thesovan. I was looking at Yara. Yara was looking at the table in front of her with an expression I had to think about before I understood it. She was trying very hard not to look like she was listening. Log Addendum 2131. Thesovan accepted the preliminary statement. She said the host delegation acknowledges the Rethsul request to table a preliminary contextual statement in the exact tone that Vethic diplomats use when something has happened that they didn't plan for and, they have decided, in real time, that they are going to be ahead of it rather than behind it. Salon read the statement. 4 sentences. It said, the Section 4C language was composed under specific time constraints that are now part of the historical record. Those constraints do not reflect current Rethsul intent. The Rethsul delegation acknowledges this context as relevant to any modern interpretation of the language. This acknowledgement is offered without precondition. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then, the Geraden first representative said, the Geraden delegation takes note. Which is, that's diplomatic language for, we heard it, it's in the record, we'll see where it goes. 300 years. They've been fighting about this language for 300 years. And, then, a human asked a question at a dinner table and, I don't know. I don't know what just happened. I don't know if this is the beginning of something or a single moment that doesn't lead anywhere. I don't know if Yara knew what she was doing or if she genuinely just read the panel because she was curious. She's eating dessert. She has the expression of someone who found their packet. Log paused. Log entry Vrethkahan. Cycle 7, Day 4. 0612. I am eating breakfast alone in the commissary. I do this every morning. It is not different this morning. Yara is at the next table. We have not spoken since the reception. There was no reason to speak. She is a dietary rotation specialist on a logistics pass. I manage cargo manifests. She just stole my coffee. Let me clarify. She didn't steal it. The commissary tables on the B-side are very close together, and the coffee dispensary uses cylindrical cups that all look identical, and she'd picked up the wrong one before I could say anything, taken a drink, made the face, and set it back down. That, she said, looking at the cup, is terrible. It's the commissary blend, I said. It tastes like it's mostly container. It is mostly container. The actual coffee content is approximately 30% by volume. The rest is, I don't want to know, said Yara. She got up, went to the dispensary, got a new cup, and came back. She sat down at the chair angled 45 degrees from my table, which is the chair that exists in the space between separate tables and same table that social convention on Oran 7 has never fully resolved. She ate her breakfast. I ate mine. The compact review, she said, after a while. Yes, I said. Was that? She paused. Not the way you pause when you don't know what to say. The way you pause when you've decided how much of what you're thinking to put outside your head. Was that normal? What the ambassador did. No, I said. It was not normal. She looked at her food. I just read the panels, she said. Yes. And, asked some questions. Yes. She ate for a moment. Then, the vending machine thing at Kellen. That's in my file, isn't it? There's a notation. Does it say what happened? Resolved without escalation. Maintenance update applied station-wide. She made a sound. Not a laugh, exactly. The sound of someone recognizing themselves in a description they didn't write. The coil calibration was off on 3 units, she said. I noticed the pattern because I was stuck waiting. I figured I might as well be useful. She said this without any particular emphasis. No pride in it. No self-deprecation either. I was stuck. I noticed a thing, I was useful. I drank my terrible coffee and did not say anything, because I was composing the third thing I was going to put in my monitoring file and I needed to think about how to phrase it. Log Addendum 0639. She told me the Kellen story unprompted. She doesn't seem to track the incidents as incidents. She tracks them as, there was a problem, the problem had a shape, I found the shape. The problem always has a shape. That's what I keep thinking. I need to file this morning's cargo report. I need to stop thinking about this. She drank my coffee by accident. I'm noting that too. Not because it's relevant. Because I want the record to be complete. The Compact Review formal sessions began on Cycle 7, Day 2, and I attended none of them because they are conducted by diplomats and I am not one, and my presence would have been either redundant or alarming depending on the session. I know what happened in them because Thesevan told me, in the careful sequence of conversations she conducted over the following days, in which she was demonstrably telling me things she could not officially tell me through channels that did not create a documented record. The first session, Tressalon tabled a formal proposal to revise the geographic language in Section 4C using updated geological survey records rather than the original mountain references. Not a new position. The Refsul had tabled this proposal, in various forms, at every review since Cycle 180. The Vethiak had always acknowledged it without commitment. The Garadin had always opposed it on the grounds that revising Foundation language created precedent for challenging other sections. This time, the Garadin first representative asked a question. Is the revision being proposed as a correction of error or as an update to reflect changed conditions? Tressalon answered, update to reflect changed conditions. The first representative nodded. Took a note. Did not object. Thesevan, telling me this in the corridor outside my office on Day 3, had the expression of someone who has witnessed a card trick and cannot identify the mechanism. The framing, she said. Yes, I said. Someone offered the framing. Yes. She looked at me. Not in session. No. At a dinner. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then, if both parties acknowledge the underlying problem separately, you don't need anyone to admit fault publicly. She'd heard it too. Through the ambient noise, from 40 meters away, in dim Vethiak lighting. It's not a new idea, I said. In diplomatic theory, that framing, she's not a diplomat. No. She's a dietary rotation specialist. Thesevan looked at me with an expression I have spent the subsequent days trying to categorize. It contains something like wonder and something like professional chagrin and something else underneath both of those things that I think might be the Vethiak equivalent of course. The vending machine, she said. Yes, I said. We stood in the corridor for a moment. She found where it flexed, Thesevan said. Log Addendum, Day 3, 1420. Third session is over. I've processed 6 cargo manifests, 2 berth reassignments for late arriving delegates, and 1 formal request from the Refsul Cultural Advisor for dimmer luminescence panels in their delegation corridor, which I handled by talking to the same aesthetic systems liaison I always talk to, which took 4 minutes. I have been doing my job. I am very good at doing my job. I keep thinking about the difference between approaching a problem with the tools you brought, and stopping when those tools don't work, versus approaching a problem, running out of tools, and looking at the problem until you find where it flexes. This is not a profound observation. Diplomats know this. Engineers know this. I think what unsettles me is that she didn't treat the vending machine differently than the dinner conversation. She brought the same quality of attention to both. She doesn't seem to have a category for, this matters more than that. She just looks until she finds where things flex. That is either very useful or very dangerous, and I cannot tell from here which one it is. On Day 5, I ran into her in the maintenance corridor on Level 2. This requires explanation. The maintenance corridor on Level 2 is not a PlayStation personnel go unless they're maintenance personnel or they're lost or they're me, because I take that route to avoid the promenade when the promenade is hosting delegation foot traffic. It's faster and quieter and the lighting is functional rather than beautiful, which I find restorative. Yara was crouched in front of a secondary water reclamation relay box, with the panel open and her multi-tool out, doing something with deliberate care. I stopped. She looked up. "Leak," she said. "What?" "The relay box. There's a leak." "Minor. I noticed it yesterday." She gestured at the fitting she was tightening. "Level 2 maintenance is on my station shared alert list. The alert has been in there for 2 cycles. The maintenance crew has 18 open work orders." I checked. She looked back at the fitting. "This takes 4 minutes." I stood in the corridor and watched her finish. She replaced the panel. She stood up. She put the multi-tool away. "Is this going to be in my file too?" she said. "There's no regulation against, that's not what I asked." I looked at her. She looked at me. The fluorescent lighting on level 2 does not do anyone any favors, and in it she looked tired in the way that people who have been doing specific, careful work for a long time look tired, not depleted, but used. "Yes," I said. "Probably." She nodded. Like she'd expected it. Like the file was a thing that accumulated around her the way weather accumulates, and she'd made her peace with it. "The compact thing," she said. "Yes. Is it going to be okay?" I thought about that. Not the diplomatic answer. The actual answer. "The first time they've changed the framing in 40 years, I said. "Maybe. Probably. It'll take more sessions, more reviews." But, I paused. The coil turned. She looked at me. "The packet moved," I said. "It didn't fall yet, but it moved." She thought about this for a moment. "I didn't do anything," she said. "Not defensively. Plainly. I know. I read a panel and asked some questions at a dinner. I know. That's not," she stopped. "Then, that's not a thing." "No," I said. "It's not a thing. It was a conversation. The ambassador chose to have it, and then chose what to do with it, and that was the ambassador's decision." She looked at me steadily. She was deciding whether to accept this or argue with it. She accepted it. "Okay," she said. She picked up her bag and walked back toward the promenade. Log Addendum, Day 5, 11:08. I watched her fix a relay fitting in a maintenance corridor. She checked the alert list. She noticed the open work orders. She had a tool. She spent 4 minutes. I keep trying to build a theory about her that makes her into a specific kind of thing, a strategist, an operator, someone with a system, because if she has a system, I can understand the system. If she has a system, I can predict it. I don't think she has a system. I think she has attention. And a multi-tool. And the particular stubbornness of someone who, when a coil doesn't turn, doesn't leave. Who looks for where the machine flexes. That's not a system. That's just a way of being in a place. I don't know what to do with that. I think I've been doing my job wrong for a long time." Log paused. She left on cycle 7, day 8, on the 0900 shuttle to Kellen. I processed her departure manifest at 0613. Standard. No flags. No incidents to note beyond the panel notation from day 1, which I'd classified as minor, no regulatory breach, resolved. I was at my desk when the shuttle bay announcement came. I didn't go to see her off. There was no reason to see her off. She is a dietary rotation specialist. People come through this station constantly. I have a cargo manifest and a Retsul delegation who will be here for another 3 days and a formal station inspection at the end of the cycle. I didn't go. At 0854, I got a message from Thesovan. It said, she left something at the senior table from night 1. Found it this morning during hall cleanup. Thought you should have it. Attached was an image. A napkin. Orin 7 formal event hall napkins are Vethiac manufactured, heavy stock, textured. the particular deep blue of the sky display refracted through the lighting system. They are not disposable. They're collected and laundered. This one had writing on it. Handwriting, which is a human thing, they mark things by hand, with implements, in the same way they carry metal coins and multi-tools, as though every version of the world might require you to have done the physical work of it. On the napkin, in Yara's handwriting, was a diagram. The Section 4C boundary language, redrawn. The original geographic markers labeled with their current geological positions. A clean line showing where the boundary actually was based on geological survey data versus where the language implied it should be. The difference, visually, small. Functionally, everything. At the bottom of the napkin, one note. Not a mistake. Just a mountain that moved. Log addendum, 0901. Her shuttle just departed. The review continues. Day 6 opens in 4 hours. Tressalon has requested a bilateral session with Thesovan before the full session convenes, which is unusual, and which Thesovan has accepted, which is also unusual. I have the napkin image in my monitoring file. I am aware that this is evidence of nothing except that a person thought about something and wrote it down. I'm going to go get a coffee from the commissary. The terrible kind. I've started to think of it as a calibration tool. It tells me how bad things can be, and they're still fine, still manageable, still just mostly container. The packet moved. That's enough for now. That's enough. Final log entry for this monitoring file, Vrethkahan, Secondary Logistics, Orin 7. Compact Review 3rd Session, concluded with a joint working group established to address Section 4C language revision. Timeline, 2 years. No guarantees. No celebrations. Unit 7C, coil mechanism serviced and recalibrated. Works correctly now. Maintenance alert from Level 2 relay box, closed. File status, I'm leaving it open. I don't know why I'm leaving it open. Actually, I do know. Because she took the 0900 shuttle to Kellen Station, and Kellen Station has a vending machine problem she fixed once already, and she checked the open work orders, and she carries a multi-tool, and she reads everything. She reads everything. And there are a lot of panels on this station I've stopped reading. Log ends. Archival note, appended by Orin 7 Historical Records, Cycle 44, the third Orin Compact Review, Cycle 7, produced the first substantive revision to Section 4C language in the Compact's history. The revision was adopted unanimously in Cycle 9, following a bilateral session between the Vethiak and Rethsul delegations and subsequent Karadan concurrence. The geological survey boundary markers proposed in the revision were described, in the formal amendment documentation, as reflecting updated conditions rather than correction of error. Secondary Logistics Officer Vrethkahan served on Orin 7 for 11 additional cycles before transferring to senior station management. He is noted in internal administrative records for introducing a station-wide open alert review system for minor maintenance issues. Policy citation: if you are stuck waiting, you might as well be useful. Specialist Yara Okafor Bell returned to Orin 7 for dietary rotation assignments 3 additional times. Her file, as of last update, contains one recurring notation: vending unit altercation. Resolved without escalation. Asterisk.